And pressure is mounting on the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to advance the Gaza ceasefire proposal unveiled by US President Joe Biden. Several world leaders are urging both Israel and Hamas to agree to the permanent cessation of hostilities. A joint statement by Qatar, Egypt and the United States called on both Hamas and Israel to finalize the agreement, embodying the principles outlined in it. They said that the deal, and I'm quoting here, offers a roadmap for a permanent ceasefire and ending the crisis. Netanyahu says that his conditions for ending the war, the destruction of Hamas's military and governing capabilities, and the return of hostages have not changed. He called the truce offer a non-starter until Hamas no longer poses a threat to Israel and Israel's goals of destroying the Hamas are not met. Striking a contradictory note, a senior Israeli source told Hebrew media that the proposal laid out by Biden provides for the achievement of all goals. It has a framework for freeing the hostages before a permanent ceasefire is enforced. This meets all the conditions. In a phone call with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Qatar's Prime Minister said that the mediators hope all parties will deal positively with the principles of ceasefire proposal. This includes the withdrawal of Israeli forces from all populated areas in Gaza. Meanwhile, the families of the hostages demand that Netanyahu stands up and publicly accepts the deal.
את כולם! את כולם! את כולם!
We demand that Netanyahu stand up and publicly support the Israeli proposal which President Biden presented yesterday. Stand up in front of the Israeli citizens and publicly accept this deal.
At a weekly rally in Tel Aviv, demonstrators demanded that Netanyahu government accept the ceasefire deal and secure the detainees' release. Police used forces to disperse the demonstrators, but Netanyahu faces big opposition to deal from within his cabinet. Hardliners, that's Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich and Minister of National Security Itamar Ben-Gvir, are threatening to pull the government down if the deal is accepted. Gvir called the proposal foolhardy and added that it would be a victory of terrorism and security threat to the state of Israel. Smotrich opposed the return of displaced Gazans to the territory's north and said it's a wholesale release of terrorists. On the other hand, Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid urged the government to accept the deal. He vowed to back Netanyahu if his far-right coalition partners quit. Meanwhile, on ground, fighting raged in the besieged Gaza Strip. Battles ensued in Rafah in southern Gaza near the border with Egypt. Later today, Egypt will host Israeli and US officials to discuss the reopening of the Rafah crossing. That's a vital conduit for aid into Gaza. Now, for more on this, we're being joined by Professor James A. Russell, who's an associate professor in the Department of National Security Affairs at NPS. He's joining us live from Monterey. Sir, thank you so much for joining us on World DNA.
Thank you.
Sir, we've already heard the comments that are coming from Netanyahu's government, from some of the hardliners. They are saying it's a foolhardy truce deal and that they have threatened to quit as well. That being said, do you reckon this deal has already hit a stalemate?
Yes, I think it's at a stalemate, and I think it reflects the fundamental disagreements between the West and the United States and the Likud/far-right section of Israeli politics, as represented by the Israeli Prime Minister. From the American perspective, I believe the Biden administration seeks to use the circumstances of the war in Gaza to create some kind of longer-term political solution to the Palestinian problem with the Israelis. And the Likud/far-right side of Israeli politics has no interest in any kind of deal with the Palestinians. They have used the circumstances of the Gaza war to undertake a military campaign of ethnic cleansing that has resulted in the deaths and injuries of over 100,000 Palestinians. They seek to drive as many of the Palestinians as they can out of Gaza so that they can settle Gaza with right-wing settlers like that, which is happening in the West Bank. So these two goals are completely contradictory in nature. President Biden has declined to use any of America's influence to try to support his point of view, and has been sort of controlled, I think, by the Israeli prime minister and the far right side of Israeli politics.
Right. Sir, in fact, you're absolutely right that this has put a spotlight on the deep divisions between Israel, within Israel, and also its allies. Also, it's important to note here that it is an election year in the United States as well. What sort of implications do you think this will have for Joe Biden?
Well, it has very significant implications for Biden. The whole war in Gaza and the U.S.-Israeli relationship has driven a deep schism in the Democratic Party, in which we have the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, represented by Senator Bernie Sanders, for example. But it's not just Bernie Sanders. There's a sort of a coalition of centrist Democrats who have insisted that the Biden administration start introducing some element of conditionality on American assistance to Israel, which, of course, President Biden has declined. And then on the other side, you have the Republicans who are anxiously seizing upon the whole war in Gaza and the domestic political turmoil in the United States to go on a witch hunt in which they are pursuing what they say is rampant anti-Semitism. And I can tell you this is a complete and utter travesty. But it demonstrates to you and your viewers, I think, the sort of tenuous nature of American domestic politics today, in which any issue that comes up is going to be used for political benefit by both parties. So in President Biden's case, he, of course, needs a unified Democratic Party going to the election, even if he is running against a convicted felon. We have this extraordinary circumstance in the United States in which the Republican nominee is a convicted felon. And he had extraordinarily, you can't make this stuff up. All the Republican leaders in the Congress went to New York for photo ops to support their candidate who's been convicted of committing crimes. I can't believe this. But the point is that this is all part of a very complicated domestic political situation. And Biden, of course, desperately needs his own party unified. And this war has driven a wedge through the middle of his party. There isn't any other way to state it.
All right. Well, Professor Russell, thank you so much for joining us on World DNA with your insights on this.
My pleasure. Thank you.
For latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.